Everything just changed for the Toronto Blue Jays as we have multiple new updates ahead of tonight's huge series against the Washington Nationals. But one of these updates surrounding Max Scherzer has huge implications going forward as we got a new update revealing some wild details surrounding his injury and what the Jays' plan is going forward. We're going to break that down and discuss what this means, as well as write down some other updates and interesting stats ahead of tonight's series opener against the Nationals at the Rogers Center. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. If you want to help us towards the big goal of 20,000 subscribers, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But ladies and gentlemen, the Jays are coming off of a very interesting series, a solid series overall. They split the series with one of the worst pitching performances we've seen in a couple of those games, specifically from the bullpen, Richard Lovelady and Jacob Burns. But we know the Jays, I covered it in yesterday night's video, the Jays made multiple moves. Richard Lovelady's gone. They made some moves, and we'll dive into those a little bit. But the big storyline coming into tonight's game and really heading into yesterday's was Max Scherzer and his injury. And there's a few different things to go over here. So there were some articles that have dropped, and you can see here from Schneider last night. We also have an update from Hazel May. I'll start with the Hazel May one. Hazel May tweeted, just minutes ago, Max Scherzer is seeing a specialist in the U.S. today about his thumb and what the plan is going forward. So we'll probably hear an update surrounding Max Scherzer over the next couple of days. We'll keep you up to date as soon as that update drops. We also have some other updates surrounding the current Jays plan with Max Scherzer being absent for the next couple weeks at least. So Blue Jays notebook with items on Max Scherzer to the IL. And, of course, also seeing Yariel Rodriguez in yesterday's game. So let's dive right into this. And here is this information that comes out from Schneider. This article gives some backstory as to what actually happened. So after his last outing in Fort Myers and how he felt the day and the day after, that led us to set our plan the way we did with the rotation, Schneider said of Scherzer. And then everything he did leading up to Saturday, both from a bullpen session and throwing session, on how he's feeling, it kind of just crept up on him a little bit more so than it had in spring. It was unfortunate that the timing was his first start, third game of the year. And the 40-year-old right-hander is visiting a hand specialist today to determine the next steps. But the uncertainty over his thumb resurfaced the question's choice to not, retain Ryan Yarbrough, of course. Now they've thinned out their pitching depth. And an interesting piece here from Shai with Jake Bloss, the centerpiece of the return. Some of the Jays want to probably get off to a good start after turning the corner in the middle of camp before we start looking at him. So this is a pretty big deal. It seemed to, again, we knew it was a lingering problem regarding his thumb. However, we heard that, hopefully it was going to be okay and he was going to manage it, something he was going to have to deal with. And then he goes out and starts the game on Saturday, which I was at, I was at the Rogers Center for that game. He looked, iffy to start, a couple of home runs in the first inning. And then, of course, Max Scherzer started to deal with the injury. And it's unfortunate that it happened because they probably could have won that game if A, you have Ryan Yarbrough, or B, if that injury doesn't happen. And then we're talking about a 3-1 Jays team as opposed to a 2-2. But regardless of that, the big question mark now is what happens going forward with the starting rotation. Now, we'll dive into it a little bit with some articles that have come out regarding their actual plan and John Schneider's plan. But it seems like Jake Bloss is someone they want to have a good start at AAA prior to being called up. And it makes a lot of sense. They weren't expecting to have Jake Bloss come up this early. So as a result, they're just going to leave him down in AAA for a while, which I'm perfectly fine with. I don't want to rush Jake Bloss up. The problem is they don't have much starting depth. And depending how Bowden Francis looks, hopefully he'll be looking, like his 2024 self. But today, that's going to be a very big test for him. Mason Flaherty is a guy who did get called up, as well as Easton Lucas. And you can see this here. Mason opened a lot of our eyes, especially this year, but going back to last year and then kind of turning the corner. Excited for him to get this opportunity. And of course, we know that Chris Bassett helped the bullpen a lot yesterday, which means it's going to be fairly healthy today with probably just Jeff Hoffman being out. And it's going to be, interesting surrounding the starting pitching staff because we know how important Chris Bassett is going to be. And luckily, we have one of the more durable pitching staffs in baseball with Gausman, José Berríos, and Chris Bassett. But you look now at who is going to be starting. Now, again, yesterday, Scherzer was put on the 15-day IL, and Easton Lucas was recalled from AAA and will be active for, and was active for yesterday's game and going forward. Now, Easton Lucas is a very, very interesting player, and he looked solid in spring. He didn't have a ton of sample size there, but you look back to his spring debut, he struck out 3 in 2 innings. Although it was against the Yankees B squad, his fastball and cutter combo graded out well. Developing his changeup will be key to being an efficient depth starter for Toronto and an effective depth starter. So, he has 3 pitches. It's going to be interesting to see what they do on what looks like Friday against the Mets because they have the series against the Nationals covered. Of course, the next spot we're looking at now, it's a 3-game series, I believe, against the Nationals. So you have today Bowden Francis, then you have José Berríos, then you have Kevin Gausman. So Friday, and then you have an off day. So Friday is going to be the big game against the Mets. And it seems that Easton Lucas is going to be the one who starts, but it really changes the outlook of this team with Max Scherzer down because we knew starting rotation health was going to be the most crucial aspect of this whole team. And as much as we talk about the offense, I think the offense is looking very solid. It looks good. They're battling. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Even though the offense last year was in theory and it looked really bad, they were still better than league average. And I think that's going to continue to be the case this season. But the pitching staff is going to be the biggest thing. The bullpen, we know the back end of the bullpen is elite. We know the front end of the starting rotation is solid enough to win games. The question is now, the back end of the rotation, can Easton Lucas step up? Will he go out and make a trade for a guy like Dylan Cease, depending on how things go? Jake Bloss waiting in the wings. It's going to be, that's the biggest question mark for this Jays team, is what happens in the middle relief innings if you don't get a ton of outings from your starter, because you still have Jacob Barnes. You now have Mason Flaherty, who can help in little stretches. You have Easton Lucas, but are those guys going to be enough against the good teams in the AL East? And that's going to be the big question going forward. And you look at the current depth. They only have 4 starters right now. Let's say you assume Easton Lucas is the 5th starter. You look at the back end of the bullpen, it looks solid. Jeff Hoffman, Jimmy Garcia, Chad Green, Nick Sandlin, all those things, even Brandon Little. But the early part is what's scary. You're going to have to rely on Mason Flaherty, Easton Lucas, depending on if he's going to be a starter or not. Jacob Barnes, who's not very good. You have to hope that Yariel Rodriguez can either A, continue to be a back-end relief pitcher, which kind of stretches everybody down, and then maybe you have Nick Sandlin go in the 5th or 6th inning and helping with some long relief, or B, you have somebody else step up. And Yariel Rodriguez is kind of the wild card here. And you see this here, Yariel Rodriguez, versatility is an asset, and he may end up in the rotation. But the Blue Jays, but the impressive 8th inning he threw against the Orioles left the Jays ask themselves if he's perhaps better off using leverage roll. He almost touched 99 miles per hour. His peak yesterday was 98.4. We were just talking about it. You don't want to be reactionary. You know that you have that, but it's nice to see it in real time. We'll continue to talk about it until Friday. I guess the best way to answer that, if it looks like that, that's pretty good late in the game. And now you start to look at how this shapes up. And Don Schneider came out and basically said, and the report from Hazel May, Easton Lucas and Yariel Rodriguez are in the running to start on Friday. I think it's ultimately going to be Easton Lucas paired with maybe Yariel Rodriguez going a couple of innings. But seeing what we saw out of him in the setup role yesterday, I really like the idea of Yariel kind of just being a guy who goes in and just pump out almost 100 miles an hour and just use that stuff, because we know he hasn't been super effective. Again, it's only his 2nd year in the MLB, but his starting numbers aren't great. His long relief numbers aren't great either. So it's going to be interesting to see, and it really changes the outlook of this team. We were hoping this was going to be something that can be addressed towards the deadline, but now that Scherzer's out for at least a couple of weeks, probably longer, they have to address it. And the ideal situation is that Jake Bloss dominates AAA and then he gets called up and he can be that 5th starter. You have Alek Manoah returning in August or somewhere around August. So you're at the point now where there are some reinforcements coming, but not in the first weekend of the series, and things really took a turn for this team. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do. One quick note before we wrap up. Santander, preview to tonight's series, he absolutely mashes against the Nationals in his career with almost 1,000 OPS. And the Nationals have a worse bullpen than the Jays. They have one of the worst bullpens in baseball, and their bullpen is off to a horrible start this year. So if the Jays can get to the starter early, make him work, get to the bullpen, the Jays offense should be able to take care of business as long as Bound Francis tonight does his job. And over the next 3 games, you got to take 2 out of 3. It's going to be tough against Mackenzie Gore, who struck out 13 in his season opener. They play, of course, Gore on Tuesday, tomorrow. So it's going to be interesting. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. We'll have a video following the game tonight, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Cheers.